Okay, so for this lecture, we're going to look at the back end, or the middle and the end of the nephron. So the last time we were here, we were looking at the production of filtrate. And remember, that comes from the glomerulus, which is right here, right? And that filters almost everything out of the blood except for blood cells and large proteins. So that filtrate now comes out, gets captured by the Bowman's capsule. And so that's where we just were. And then we're going to move our way through the next 3 or 4 stops, really. Okay, so what we're working with here is filtrate, and we're going to see what gets reabsorbed back into the blood. And there's also the process of secretion, which is getting taken from the blood directly into that filtrate. So this is the structure. And the reason why I put this up here is here's your artery, your renal artery comes in. The blood goes into the glomerulus, which is right here, okay? And then you can see that it snakes its way throughout everywhere, right? That's where all of this reabsorption is going to be happening. So when we say that things are reabsorbed, it's coming from the filtrate, which is in the tan or beige-looking tubules. It's going to go from there and into the bloodstream, and then you can see that that comes out through our renal vein and leaves the kidney. I just wanted to show you this picture so you could see that there's blood surrounding all of these tubules that we're going to be talking about, and that's where this reabsorption or secretion occurs. Okay, so after the glomerulus, the filtrate goes into the Bowman's capsule, and then it makes its way into the proximal convoluted tubule. Remember, proximal means closer to, so it's going to be closer to the glomerulus, and it's sometimes called the PCT. So PCT, that's what its acronym is. So the main job here is reabsorption. So we've pulled almost everything out of the blood to start. Now we're going to put almost everything back in. And this is the way that your kidneys maintain homeostasis. So some of the main things that go back into the blood is water, of course, and then all of those other things that really came out. So we're going to look at the sugars, the amino acids, because we need to build up proteins, bicarbonate, sodium, even calcium, chlorides, everything that our body feels like it needs to be at homeostasis, it will take back in. On the next slide, I have even more to look at, but these are the main ones. We're also going to do the process of secretion. Now, secretion, it goes from the blood, from those peritubular capillaries, and directly into the filtrate. Now, you might say, well, doesn't that happen during the process of filtration? And some of it does, but the blood moves through there, and some of it does not go through that glomerulus or doesn't get filtered. So this is just another area where we can take stuff from our blood and put it directly into this filtrate or this soon-to-be urine, just so it doesn't affect our body. And the main stuff that gets taken from the blood and directly put into this soon-to-be urine is poisons and any antibiotics that are not being used, any type of drugs that may be in our system for something that was prescribed to us, other hard drugs that people take. Your liver is really responsible for breaking that down and then getting it out of your body. Okay, and then one of the other things that we look at is nitrogenous waste. And that some of that will come out through filtration, but some of it has to be secreted directly from the blood into this filtrate. And we have urea, uric acid, and creatinine. Just as like a background here, urea is formed from the breakdown of proteins, and it forms what's called ammonia, and ammonia can kill us. So our body has to take that ammonia and change it into urea, which is a good thing, but we still don't want that in our system, so we got to urinate that out. And then creatinine is one of the other main ones, and that comes from the usage of muscles. You may have heard of creatine for bodybuilders. Creatinine is produced as a byproduct when muscles work and they get broken down a little bit. They produce creatinine, and our body needs to filter that out as well. And this is one way that we get it out. I don't want to keep saying the word filter, but it just comes out of my mouth. We need to secrete it from our blood directly into this waste. So we don't want high amounts of that. And creatinine is actually one of the main structures that doctors look at in blood if people are having kidney failure. So if they have high levels of creatinine in their blood, that tells them that their kidneys are not getting it out of the system, and that will cause them to do some more tests. Okay, uric acid just comes from the breakdown of various different foods, but that's just a little background on them. I'm not really going to test you on the specifics, but you may hear the word creatinine come up once in a while, especially when we're talking about muscle and breakdown in blood tests. Okay, so here, this is where we were. Proximal convoluted tubule. You can see that glucose, amino acids, water, salts, a lot of this other stuff, that comes directly from, here's the soon to be urine. So that's what we call filtrate. We're going to take stuff from in there and we're going to absorb that back into our blood. So reabsorption in red. And then we're also going to take those drugs and poisons and we're going to put those directly into this filtrate. So then it hopefully gets out of our system. Okay. The next stop is the loop of Henle. So that's this area right here. And the main job here is water reabsorption. Now, it goes down, it descends first, and then it ascends. So that's something to remember. We don't ascend first, we descend first. It goes down first. And the descending loop is in charge of reabsorption of water, which is key because we don't want to urinate water that we really need. And the ascending loop is in charge of reabsorbing salt into this area. It's not really reabsorbed back into the blood. It's kind of put into this interstitial area. And that sets up concentration gradient to continue absorbing more and more water. Because if you remember about diffusion and concentration, if there's a high salt concentration on one side and a high water concentration on the other, water is going to move towards that. So if we keep pumping out salt here, this NaCl, sorry, we'll just circle this. If we keep pumping out more and more NaCl, that's going to cause more and more water to be reabsorbed on the descending limb. So the salt reabsorption isn't exactly going into our bloodstream. Some of it does, but it's really setting up a concentration gradient for water to continue to be reabsorbed here. Okay, so once again, that is happening right here at this loop of Henle. And most importantly, you can see how many arrows of water reabsorption we're getting there. Okay. Then we have what's called the DCT, or distal convoluted tubule. And I like to say that the main job of the DCT is to continue to regulate that blood pH. It's our last check to say, okay, what should we reabsorb and what should we kick out? So for reabsorption, yes, water is always going to happen. Some of these salts, remember, salts are just ions. They don't necessarily have to be like NaCl, sodium chloride. But then reabsorption of, let's say, bicarbonate. So bicarbonate is a base. That would raise our pH if we had to. We also may be secreting in that area. And that might be the secretion of any nitrogenous waste that's still in that in the blood that we need to get rid of. Or most importantly, we might have to secrete hydrogen ions. Hydrogen makes your blood pH more acidic. So if our kidneys and our body is saying, hey, our blood is more on the acidic side, in the DCT, it might start kicking out hydrogen ions from the blood directly into that filtrate. If it says that the same thing, if our blood is too acidic, it might start reabsorbing more bicarbonate as well, because this is a base, okay? So it all depends on what our blood is saying. If our blood is saying, hey, we're too acidic, we're going to want to get rid of hydrogen ions. We're also going to want to reabsorb more bicarbonate, and vice versa. If we're way too basic, we're going to want to hold on to more hydrogen ions and maybe get rid of some bicarbonate or transform it. Okay, so that's the DCT. That's its main job. Regulate that blood pH. It's our final check before we're just about ready to go out of the nephron. So here's the PCT. Here's the DCT. Here's that loop of Henle. I'm just going to write loop. Okay, and you can see Here's reabsorption right here. Reabsorption is in blue. Reabsorption in blue. And even here, reabsorption of some of our salts, water, our bicarbonate. And then this in the red, those are our secretions. So going directly from the blood and putting that into that waste material to get rid of it. Okay. Our last stop is what we call the collecting duct. And that's right here. So what we looked at is glomerulus, PCT, loop of Henle, DCT. And now the collecting duct is our final stop before this actually gets produced into urine. And the main job of the collecting duct is to reabsorb water again. We don't want to waste anything, and water is one of the main things we don't want to waste. We want to make sure our blood pressure is at its normal amount. We want to make sure we have enough water in our system. So there's a hormone called ADH. ADH is called anti-diuretic hormone. Okay, anti-diarrhea you can think of. Now, diarrhea has a lot of water in the stool, so anti-diuretic hormone causes us to absorb as much water as possible in the kidneys. Okay, and that's controlled by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus checks how much water we have, and then it will tell, remember they work very close with each other, it will tell the pituitary gland to release this ADH. And that ADH goes directly to this collecting duct, and it tells it, okay, start pulling as much water out of that filtrate, what's soon to be urine. Start pulling as much water out of that because we need to hold on to that water as much as possible. Okay, so ADH would be working right here. Remember, ADH is a hormone, anti-diuretic hormone. It's going to cause more and more water to be absorbed from this urine, so we don't waste it. Okay, and you can see here, no ADH present, all of that water is going to fill into your bladder. If ADH is present, it's going to take as much water as much of that water out. I will tell you this: when you become of age and you decide that possibly different substances want to go in your body in the form of alcohol, alcohol actually turns off ADH. So our body recognizes alcohol and causes you to become dehydrated because ADH gets turned off. So instead of absorbing that water in that collecting duct, your body says, well, we don't want that anymore because it's got a higher amount of alcohol in it. So it's just going to send it right down to your bladder, and your bladder is going to fill a lot faster. Okay, so just a last little overview. You have your glomerulus right here. You have your PCT, loop of Henle, DCT, and then here's that collecting duct. And that's where ADH is acting to reabsorb that water. Whoops. Okay. And that is going to run into what we call the calyx. Remember, this is a calyx right here. I'm going to just draw a line up here. There's your calyx, or we see one right here. And that calyx, once it hits that, that is now considered urine. That will then run into the renal pelvis, out through the ureter, and we'll cover that really next lesson. Okay, so I'm going to create another diagram and maybe walk my way through it, but this is just a step-by-step look through each part of that nephron.